Alright, it's 6:19, call of finance and committee to order.
Can I call select board to order at the same time? Just, we have a quorum here and
Oh,
more
yeah.
for if discussion ensued, but not.
I didn't realize, I see Tom,
Yeah.
okay. So, meeting minutes is first. This is the minutes from right before special town meeting that we went through very quick. Can I get a motion on the meeting minutes from February 15th? Oh, there's two, is that what I'm seeing?
Yep.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense. The first one, let's do February 15th, which is the special town meeting. Again, obviously that one's very quick.
I make a motion to accept the meeting minutes from February 15th.
Second.
Is Ted going, any discussion, sorry, is Ted gonna be able to talk on his own, or do we have to have him, we're gonna have to have him added every time we need to make a
I
roll?
think I can do it.
Okay, cool, hopefully. We'll have to do a roll call, which is fine. Any discussion, comments on the meeting minutes from February 15th? Alright, let's do a roll call, starting with Tommy.
Charlotte, aye.
Good question. I don't know why I did that.
That's
Yeah, we'll go with Karen next.
Narwhal, aye.
Ross, aye.
Ted,
Purcell, aye.
Mode, aye.
Winnica, aye.
I'll start with you next.
Oh, thanks.
That's a very bad decision. I went to the end of the table thinking that would be a good idea.
Just looked right over me.
No. Alright, February 22nd is the next meeting minutes. Can I get a motion on the meeting minutes from February 22nd?
I make a motion to accept the meeting minutes of February 22nd.
Second.
Any discussion on meeting minutes from February 22nd? Comments? Alright, we'll start with you this time.
Winnica, aye.
Charlotte, aye.
Narwhal, aye.
Ross, aye.
Ted? Mowat, aye. Ted?
Purcell.
So, aye.
Alright.
Aye.
Thanks, Ted. Alright, let's, so the next one is the Wachusett School District. So, for those who were at the meeting, I know I tuned in and watched it online, but for those that were there, if you could just give a synopsis of what was talked about, things that stood out to you, I'd love to hear some feedback of people that were there.
The state needs to give us more money. How's that for the general
Yeah,
synopsis?
that's what I followed. That's what I heard a lot of too. Is there anything else that, seemed interesting or seemed specific to?
I think they're working transparently with us.
Mhm.
I feel more comfortable with this regime than the prior one. And if we can believe them, they're doing their best to keep things in check, but there's just no money to do anything with. And unfortunately, the state cut our funding and for the whole district, and it's up to the towns to make it up.
So I missed the part. I must have missed the first 10 minutes or something. What was the state formula? I heard many times that the state formula is not helping or messed up or is wrong. But what is the underlying reasoning issue? What are they saying is the point of it all?
Well, actually, there's a good article in the Telegram this morning about the whole thing too, statewide. But inflation's going up,
Mhm.
but the state only did used 1% increase. There's 46 less kids in the whole district. And our funding last year was 3 point something million, and this year it's 202,000 that we're getting for the district.
Because we're in the
Hold harmless.
So if I may, very much along Lynn's same field is that we're in hold harmless because of the slight decrease in population. But the bigger thing I think is last year it was a 3.5% inflation rate. And this year the state, I think it's 1
point something,
yeah, 1 or 1.5, I can't remember percent. So I think the biggest hit was that change in inflation rate, which is determined, the state sets that every year and it is added into the formula. So the hold harmless piece was a part of it for sure. And especially because we were, in the scheme of the decreased number of students, a very small decrease in the scheme of things. But the bigger thing I think was the change in inflation rate.
So did I see correctly that they're not using any E&D to balance their budget?
So I think that that's correct.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
That they felt that they should, because they have been historically spent down all the revolving funds that they have and E&D, that if something major were to happen or something that they have no.
Historically, they haven't spent down the E&D. Last year, they spent down the E&D due to the fact that the previous administration hadn't done it.
But there wasn't much E&D left.
I think this year they have just over $1 million certified for E&D, I think, is in my head, and
1, 2,
so.
3, 3.
Yeah, so I think that they wanted to hold off using E&D now. The hope that they could get closer to that 5% that they're allowed to carry, so in years like this, that they could throw some at the budget, because they do think that this is an abnormal budget year. However, I feel like we are always at the mercy of the state when it comes to the funding formula, the way the current formula works, and current has been forever.
But if I'm hearing, correctly, all 5 towns are using their free cash in order to balance their budgets. I didn't hear one single town in the 5 that isn't using free cash.
Right.
Oh, right. So I guess my whole thing is, pitch in as a team, put a little, just a little in. You're expecting all these towns, I know there's a couple of towns that are using quite a bit, us included.
No, yeah,
So, and we're using a big piece of it, and it's, we'd like to save it to carry forward too, and
I think, and I don't have an answer. I started watching the school committee meeting from this past Monday night, I think, or Thursday night, where the full committee voted on the budget, but I didn't get through the whole thing yet. I think part of it is that the school budget is 120 million versus the town's budgets that is 27 million. So what's in reserves, if they're hit with something, I think there's still some uncertainty on the special ed side of things and everything, funding, so they wanna make sure that they have something there, that they're not having to make huge significant cuts midway through the year, and that they would like to be able to build the E&D a little bit so that then going forward, they can provide more than a slight cost savings to the town that may end up to come back and bite everybody partway through the year. Maybe I'm misspeaking, but
Didn't they say they were worried about the buildings too, because they're putting so little into the buildings, and if something catastrophic happens, there's.
town of Rutland.
Yeah,
use of
I know.
town.
So I think every year they describe their budget year as an abnormal budget year, don't they? There's always something they gotta have extra.
Well, I was wondering, was that the state or were they saying them?
for what, sorry?
The abnormal budget year was describing the state or the school?
The state reimbursement formula, I think, the funding formula, because they went back through historics, and COVID year was a weird decrease because it was COVID, but otherwise there were trends that we were getting between like 1.5 and 3.2 million dollars in funding from the state, and this year it was
2,000 or something.
yeah.
Okay, so for those, I see what does hold harmless mean, but can somebody who understands this better than others describe what hold harmless means?
I was just gonna ask that exact same question.
So-
Somebody can
Total
describe
school enrollment from October 1 of 22 to October 1 of 23 declined. When that happens, you are considered hold harmless, so they don't reduce your chapter 78, but you don't get any additional. You only get $30 per pupil.
30?
So we still got the same amount of money, funding last year as we did, or this year as we did last year, it's just we're not getting additional, which
They
we're
don't
used
cut
to.
your aid. You
We're
just
used to
don't
getting
get,
additional.
you just don't get, so when the governor's budget comes out with, oh, I increased, chapter 70 by 5%, you don't get that. You get just hold harmless $30 per pupil.
So what's our total chapter 70 for the district right now? Does somebody know?
So the district gets
36 million,
36 million
53 million, 25.
Yep, and 51 from required local contribution, so overall, set by chapter 70 is 87 million.
But I think from what I got from the school committee meetings, from Dr. Riley and the school committee meetings, is that the bigger hit was, the hold harmless was a hit, but the bigger hit was the decrease in the inflation factor. Like we talked about, going from a 3.5% previous last year, or 3.5% previous years, to a 1 or 1.5 this year.
Okay, so going back on the hold harmless thing, number of students decreased, so we don't get whatever the percentage increase would be if we didn't. So how does that translate in numbers? You say we took a hit on that, what does that mean? You said we get $30 more or whatever per
Well,
student, but
I think the phrase taking a hit maybe isn't accurate. We just don't get the extra benefit that all the other chapter 70 districts get in terms of, so if the governor says 5%, we're not getting 5%, we're just getting we're getting what we got last year plus $30 per pupil, which doesn't equal a lot. So in previous years when our enrollment didn't decline, like last year it was $3.4 million.
okay, so in that whole, in the reduced number of students, what is that dollar value compared to what I mean, you know what I'm saying? How does that translate into dollars and cents for what's going on?
So hypothetically, if we went and hold harmless, like what the difference would be from, so I don't know, I think the school could probably get that calculation for you and what that aid should be or would be. Because some of that they would directly have gotten from chapter 70.
I guess what I'm reading into this, and that's what I wanna make sure I'm on the right track, is the increased number that they would have given us, is that equal to what the value of the less students are that we don't have to pay net minimum for? I guess is the best way to say it. In other words, the state's saying, because you had a reduction in students, you don't need an increase, you got enough money there to pay for whatever you're doing. Is that correct or not correct?
No, because those 46 students might be going elsewhere.
No, I know, that's what I'm saying. So how does that translate for us?
Well, for us, it was $3.7 million less, right? That we got the year before.
Okay, so what is 46 students in the whole district? I understand that. The whole district, what is that number? I'm sure they're not taking it out of their budget, because the last several years when we had
Well, I
less
see what
students,
you're
they didn't take anything out either.
You're saying because they're dropping students, but Rutland's not dropping students, just the total is dropping students.
Yeah, Rutland's numbers went up like
But
13
Tommy
or 14.
doesn't-
But he's
Yeah.
saying for the total budget, he's saying shouldn't that have gone down by 46 students?
Well, that's what, yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because even the years they told us that we had less students, we didn't get any reductions, the numbers still went up.
But I think
Have school budgets ever gone down?
I don't believe so.
But I think that this is one of the things we've talked about in the past also, is that with a district the size of Wachusett, a large regional school district, there's 13 buildings in the entire district. So if a decrease, even during COVID years when we were seeing decreases of a couple hundred students across the district, a couple hundred students across 13 schools is not necessarily enough to eliminate, there's still minimum staffing requirements to keep all those buildings open. You're probably not losing this year 46 students from.
Well, that could be, but as soon as we go up 10 students, we get charged more. Our minimum contribution, if we go up in students, our numbers go up.
Yeah,
Even
that's
what,
the same.
I guess I'm saying, and what Lynn was just saying earlier, that article in the paper this morning was talking about schools on a financial cliff right now. I mean, we keep talking, we're jarring the same stuff we jarred about for the last, I don't know how many years,
20,
right?
25.
So
That's what they were
when
saying
is
to
this
me.
gonna kind of straighten out? So
So I
people
think,
aren't gonna be able to afford their taxes.
I think going through the process now, of course, I think the way that obviously school districts and especially regional school districts budget is, they go based off of essentially House One budget, so the governor's budget. So the governor put in $30 per pupil. The past 2 fiscal years, it's been $60 per pupil. It's almost double. Not almost, double. But of course, you can't rely on the state to pass their budget in time. So that's gonna come in the form of essentially extra revenue for the school district at the end of the year, adding to their E&D. So unless there's maybe a concerted effort to request as the state goes through their budget process, if there is an increase in Chapter 70 aid to $60 per pupil, which would equal, I don't know, approximately, let's say double of the $202,000, reduction in the assessments. But right now, they're going based off of also a dismal state budget overall, which wasn't really substantial at all for.
I know, but going back to what I just said, it just seems like it never ends. We chew about the same things. And we're lucky enough for the people, they passed an override last year. The biggest chunk of that went to the schools. And now it seems like every year we go down the road and then we expect that override to help us out for a few years. The school just eats it up and next thing you know, boom, we're hurting town departments again. Everything's going backwards again.
So am I reading this correctly, that they're going up 4.97%?
I believe so.
Total, right?
Total
budget.
budget.
But for us, it's almost 9, right? Or almost 10, or 8 something?
So it's 7.76, but if you exclude debt service, it's 10.01%. And why do we say exclude debt service? Because it's excluded anyways.
Because what? Did you say?
Because we excluded it, so it's not within the levy.
But
I
but
see.
regardless, they're going up more than any of the towns can do. They're doubling what we as a town can go up. So what does that mean? We have to cut. Every year in order to educate, we have to cut something. Every single year.
Well, we said 4, you estimated 5.
Yeah, just under 5.
Yeah, you estimated 5 to be conservative, and they went to 10. So it really is not fair.
Well, they went up 4.97 overall, so that means we're only allowed to go up 2.5. Other municipalities can only go up 2.5.
And it's consistent, you figure inflation keeps going up, and we can only go up to 2.5, so we're stuck with it. It hurts the towns.
Every year, it's cutting, it's cutting, it's cutting, it's cutting, and it's gonna be no different.
Well, is it gonna, are we gonna cut, or are we gonna find other ways to do it and have to figure out next year, right? We're gonna kick it down the road this year, probably.
If I will say that this school administration seems to be much more supportive than previous as partnering with the towns to really do some advocacy at the state level. In the past, I very much felt that it was kind of, it doesn't matter, we don't care, we're just gonna pass it to the towns. Where this administration does seem very willing to partner with the communities, with all 5 communities, and try to leverage some of that at the state level, because it's a funding formula and it's hitting not just Wachusett, all the regional schools, and a lot of the small and mid-sized independent with community school districts as well. The way the current funding is, and this year especially, I think has been decimated.
In another 15 or 20 years, that'll be fixed.
Yeah, but that won't happen this year.
That's not a short-term fix. So, no, I agree with you. I think
Right.
that's great, but we've been talking about
Right.
that for years. And I know we've had Kim and Ann, and I'm sure we got Peter, and we've had all these people going to bat for us, and 495 and out doesn't care.
Well, like Peter said, there's only 3 of them in the whole state legislature,
right.
so.
But some of it, I think also, and this is a little bit of a divergence, sorry, Alex, that there's when I was at MMA, the Western Mass communities do kind of a Western Mass Day on the Hill, and a lot of Western Mass communities get together, they go in and kind of go to the state house and kind of help educate the legislatures there as to what it's like living west of, in the western part of the state. And I think that if there could be an effort for not only Wachusett, but a lot of these districts that are being hurt year over year over year by the funding formula, to go in and be the squeaky wheels and do some real boots on the ground advocacy rather than the letter writing and everything. It's again not gonna be an immediate fix, but
So, I hear what you're saying, but if we can only raise 2.5% and they go up 4.9%, no matter what happens, the district is always gonna be behind the schools. We're never gonna win. It's never gonna help. So, cause no matter what we do, Alex, if they go over 2.5%,
Right.
we're screwed.
Well, and you said 4 point, it doesn't matter for it, you could say that about 3%, anything over 2.5, which I don't think there's been a single year where the increase in the school hasn't been over 2.5, right? But it's just,
That is correct, which is why every year we play catch up.
But no matter what happens, they're not helping us at 4.9.
no. I mean, the fact, the
We can blame the funding, we can blame the state, we can blame everybody we want, but they still went up 4.9%.
Right, and in here, they talk about under budgeted or misbudgeted or whatever. Well, all our departments are the same thing, they're subject to inflation and all this other stuff, that they're having trouble. Whatever supplies they've gotta buy have gone up more than what they anticipate, or what anybody anticipated, it's over the 2.5. They're in the same boat too, so it's
They're coming in
we're
here
never gonna
Thursday.
win. Never
Yeah.
gonna win. And people are gonna say, well, see you later, I gotta move out of town if I can't afford my taxes.
well, that's unlikely to happen. The more likely thing that's gonna happen is we're gonna end up cutting things that we need.
We're gonna have to end up with a homeless shelter probably.
Yeah.
Well, we might make money on that, Deborah does.
Ted,
Ted,
unless I was mistaken. Cindy?
Hang on a second, I thought one of you guys had just texted.
Cindy got him, by the way.
I have two questions.
Okay.
I think the other day Lynn clarified this for me. The first one is,
the majority of the money that we have to get to the schools currently is all mandated money. It's not the additional from the schools, so that we would not benefit from shooting down some portion of the budget, even if we had another town on board. That's one question, if someone could answer that. And second is, Austin, prior to this meeting, you were using a number, and I believe we were looking at having to use about $450,000 of free cash to balance the budget. I believe that number, based on what we learned, would now have to go up. Can you tell me by how much?
Or what is the new number?
I can answer both of those, I think. So first of all, your answer about the minimum local contribution. Our minimum local contribution for FY 25 is almost 9.2 million, and our total town assessment is 16.5 million. So the minimum local contribution is roughly 2/3 of the total assessment that we owe. The increase in the minimum local contribution is about 467,000, and the total increase is 1.1 million. So the total between the minimum local and the what do they call it, the discretionary, it's about 50-50 discretionary versus minimum local contribution. And the increase in the total what do I want to call it?
Free cash.
Well, what's the negative bottom line? Well, what am I looking for? Deficit. Thank you. 850. We'll call it.
Is it, so that's the number right now?
Right now, the deficit is 850. Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
So
That discretionary.
I think
$897.
there's
97?
as
difference.
people have
High
mentioned there's
direction.
positive going into future years, but frankly, that doesn't help us now. And I think, Karen, you're not, the comment 15 years, you're probably not far off.
No,
I think we hope it's sooner than that, and there's potential it would be, but have they
It
done?
depends upon who's in office.
Well, it also depends on who's going to bat and what they're doing. I mean, has anything been done at all at this point? No. So why do we think anything's going to happen going forward?
I don't say nothing's been done. There has been some discussion.
Some individuals, yeah.
Well, there has been discussion from the towns and the schools in the past, and we've talked with our representatives and our senators and all that to try to get things changed.
Right.
And I just remember over and over and over and over and over in my head, Harriet Chandler came to one of the roundtables one year and said, "I'm just going to tell you like it is. There are plenty of school districts from 495 out to Boston that would love to do as much as you do with as little as you get." And that just sits in my head, and it's true every single year.
Yeah.
And one of
And
the,
that was one of my first budget roundtables.
and I think what I gathered is from the meeting is all the towns, we're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
And they said it's been going
Some
on
worse
20
than-
years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's only gotten worse.
But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't help us.
No.
Like, you're 100% correct, and I think it makes everyone feel a little bit better, but it doesn't change the fact that we're still,
I don't really care that Acton Boxborough is going through the same thing as we are. I don't
Yeah.
care. I only care about my town.
yeah, it's true. I mean, the only thing about the fact that everyone's going through it is that eventually, if everyone's going through it, the state, the feds, they have to listen, right? If everyone's going through it, eventually something will change.
Well, I think so respectfully, I would disagree with any comments that regional school district communities, shouldn't advocate more for more Chapter 78. Matter of fact, the Small Town Administrators Association, that is number one priority to the legislative delegation, is please figure out regional school finance. Especially in this case, right? So the governor announced this rural school aid program increasing like $15 million, which is great for Gosnell. No, that's rural. Or Whately.
Mhm.
That gives them something. But we're not considered a rural school district. One, because of our income. Rutland's average median income is $150,000. So they consider us a district that doesn't need additional resources. Last year, they had 90% regional school transportation reimbursement. The governor's proposal this year is 80, right? So,
And when we all signed in to the Wachusett Regional School District, it was promised by the state that we would get 100% of transportation every single year.
And they've
Just like
never
the
hit.
And I only know that
Well,
because
how's
my
the lottery
parents
going
remind
too?
me of that
Yeah.
every year.
And it's never hit 100%.
Never.
Never.
it was,
Highest
like I
was
said, it was
when Steve
close
Brewer
last year.
retired.
But
Yeah, it was 90 or 92.
92, something like that.
It was 90 last year, wasn't it?
No, it was when Steve Brewer, and I don't think it was 90 last year.
Yeah, you got it one year, you got it up there pretty good.
Yeah.
But that was part of the original contract. If you signed the contract, it was 100% reimbursement.
Sorry, Austin.
it was probably
Continue.
before I was born.
Right, I mean, we
You
can,
can shut up now.
we're not gonna change any of that tonight,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
No.
And
No, I think
even coming Thursday night, what are we gonna do?
no, nothing.
Nothing.
The truth of the matter is, I honestly, as much as we're here to talk about FY25 budget, I don't really care about FY25 because FY25 is basically the budget's set, right? Well, it's not, I get it, but how do we fix this going forward? How does this change going forward? Is there anything we can do to make this better going forward? FY25 aside, what can we, as finance committee, do on Thursday to talk to them to establish, the next years going forward? What can we do to help?
Best thing would be is if our school committee members would pay attention and come and ask and have conversations with us and finance committee, select board to find out what the challenges are of town. We see them once a year.
Yeah.
And when the school comes in, and then again at the town meeting, and that's it. And we have what?
We're gonna be down to 3, I guess.
Okay. Ted, go ahead. We got a good lull. Cindy, sorry. Works every time.
So I agree, Alex, that we need to have some discussion about what we're gonna do going forward. But I do also feel we really need to discuss what is our capacity to deal with FY 25 now that we are, I believe, looking at a need for free cash type of money or money that's not backed by revenue to balance our budget. And we don't have that much in free cash, do we?
Well, we do have close to that much in free cash right now. We're not quite there. So
737.
757.
757.
Yeah,
I
but
was like,
if
it's
you-
not 850.
Yeah, but you don't wanna deplete that.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Plus,
Some of
we
that's-
have to bring some of it over in the new year.
Some of that's already committed to what the budget was set at, right?
It's 850 now. So-
No, I know, okay, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
some of
But
it is
so,
already
so
committed.
Hasn't
what
been
Tommy
committed
just
yet.
asked though, is some of that 757 committed to next year? Right?
no,
Yeah, but I thought some,
Nothing has been appropriated yet.
no.
No, but.
no, but
don't
it
we
figured
always-
in your budget, you had a number.
Yeah.
free
Well, that was
cash.
to get the deficit to zero
Yeah.
based off of before school gave their budget number.
Right.
So that was our deficit when the discretionary assessment was 10% instead of 21%.
Well, that's what I'm saying, so the 800 and something we have in there now translates to what they're asking for. But you've already accounted for some of that or not, no? That would be the whole amount?
No, right, so after the schools gave their number, I reset the financial plan. I didn't put any free cash because I thought that this is an appropriate discussion for you guys to
Yeah, all right.
figure that out.
So the total, yeah, I don't disagree with that at all, Ted. I was more trying to get a bearing on how we go into the conversation on Thursday, and we definitely have to talk about FY 25, and we will. I just wanted to kind of get a discussion on the table about what we can say on Thursday to get us going in the right direction. Because, it's been said many times now that we continuously increase by more than 2.5%. So no matter what, they're going to consistently put us in the hole. So how do we frame that or get that discussion going to get them to increase it at a pace that we can actually increase that? Now, we're not, 2.5 is our increase, but that's not the total increase we have every year, right? So every year we have new growth, we have 2.5, we have local contributions that go up, we have whatever other funding we have. So there's more than 2.5, but
It's
you know,
not 10.1.
it ain't 10 point, it ain't even
No, it's
5,
not
really.
It's probably not
Right.
even 3.
Right. Well,
I'll give you
close to
3.
It's
I'll
probably
give you
close to
3.
3, yeah. But we also have other towns, town departments that want to do things. We have staff that should and need to get some sort of raise, whether it's COLA or step or performance or whatever you want to call it. We can't just have all of our money every year going to the school. And, we need to do something to get them onto a page that is reasonable. For them to lose the total amount of students, I think this is what Tommy is saying, for them to lose the total number of students, but still have what's the total increase in their budget? 4.7? No.
4.97.
So basically $5 million, a total increase of $5 million when the Chapter 70 funding would equate to, let's call it 2.5 million there. So really their increase, Chapter 70 aside, is $2.5 to $3 million, right? So they went down in total students, but go up $3 million in total costs. Now, inflation is a part of that. We're all seeing that, but is that reasonable? That $3 million right there is salary and stipends.
So Austin, you still meet with the administration, was it once a month with all of so to your point, Alex, they do hear it from, I assume that you're not just going there shaking his hand and drinking coffee. I assume you're telling him that, we gotta kind of rein it in. I'm assuming all of you are sitting there telling him that. So, they do meet once a month.
Yeah.
And they've been doing that, well, since Margaret was here.
But I think, and I remember during the whole meeting last week, or was it last week? Yeah, last week, that they kept saying this is a correction budget. It's a correction budget. They said that a couple times. But that doesn't change the fact that this is gonna increase next year by probably more, as they've
Right.
warned us in prior years, right? So I have no doubt that this is a small step into next year. Maybe after next year, it comes within reason. I think that's part of the conversation we have on Thursday to say, you know, here's FY25. What are you expecting for FY26? And then what do you think is going to happen going into FY27? Will there be some sort of normalcy? Will there, will there be a drop in total cost because we've gone up so much in the last 2 years? What's the real forecast? I think is something that we've been dearly missing from them. And we can keep saying that they're new. They started last year. I don't really care. They may have just started last year, but we still have a town to run. We still have, all 5 towns still have to do what they need to do. So that excuse doesn't fly for more than an inch to me. I don't really care.
And they fired a couple warning shots. It won't affect this, but they fired a couple warning shots. They're going to be looking for a new school here.
Which is why I'm saying,
So
what's
it's coming.
the forecast for FY27? And they should have that done by now. I really don't.
Well, what about that commission that they're putting together for the population?
So that's a 3-phase project. So the first was studying population and demographics. The second is finding regional solutions with communities, and then the third is looking at the facilities and identifying efficiencies there too. Whether that means sharing schools or, as Darren mentioned, new schools, that's like phase 3.
But how are they gonna know how many people are gonna leave and how many kids are
You
gonna
need
move
a
in?
crystal ball.
But Alex, going back to what you just said, I agree with all those things you just said, and those are the things we should talk about. But those, in one shape or another, those are the similar things have been said over the last 8, 10, 12 years that I know of.
Yep.
And usually out of the conversation comes, well, maybe the next 2 years will it'll get better. But then the next year comes, well, maybe the next 2 years will get better. Well, maybe the next 2 years, and it just keeps going down the road.
So this is a correction budget because of their oopses that happened, which I don't fault them at all, because they had to fix a lot of mistakes.
Mhm.
But why didn't they use E&D to get those instead of, that's the thing. I just wanna see them in the boat with us, trying to help us bail out, and it seems like, well, we wanna put it away. Well, so don't the towns, because in all seriousness,
Even if they use
we're
half
in
of
big
the
trouble if
E&D.
something goes wrong in town.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that, of course, and they should be using it. I think they're allowed to use up to $5 million. Is that what I saw? Of
They
E&D?
they can have up to 5 million, can't they?
5% of their
$5
total
million.
budget, so it's about 5.
So they only have $1.1 million of E&D? Is that correct?
Yeah.
So even if they used all that, right?
Even if they use half.
But
But at least then it would be a step in the right direction. I'm not
Yeah.
expecting them to do everything, but let's at least get them in the boat with the towns to help
Give them a
give
payout.
them something.
That's a fair-
Because none of us, and I don't just mean Rutland, none of the towns has got a huge surplus sitting there going, whoo-hoo, we're sitting on Easy Street. None of
Well,
them.
the interesting thing is they don't want to use it because they're concerned if something big happens.
Sure, and
They
when
didn't
something
know.
big happens, where are they going?
No, no.
Oldham,
Something-
Paxton, Princeton, Rutland,
Well, when
Sterling.
something big happens with us, we're in the same, where I'm going with that.
Right.
Yeah.
We're in
Yeah.
the same boat.
And we can't go to Wachusett and say, could you please pay up?
Yeah.
The roof caved in, could you help us?
Well, so,
Yeah, that's definitely going to be a conversation for Thursday to say, why the hell are you guys not using anything? And you can say, well, if there's a big oops, like they said, if something big happens, then that's what we want it for. But that we'd like to have that too, and we're not going to have that with
Right.
what's going on with what you're doing. So you're 100% correct, and
Oops, right now is their correction.
yeah, pretty much.
Right.
All right, so let's pause that for now. I think unfortunately, the future conversations have to be never ending, right? Because we know that it's going to always be a problem. So I feel like we're always going to be talking about that. Let's step back and talk about FY25 and what our expectation for this is. Let's touch upon that. I don't think we need to answer it tonight, but I think we need to come up with a few opinions, thoughts, a few options and strategic plays to move forward here. So FY25, as mentioned, we have an $845,000 deficit right now. Not using any free cash would be $845,000 deficit. That's all in. There's nothing really left. I think probably insurance is probably not settled at this point, but you have a pretty big.
Yeah, we budgeted 15%.
Right. So there's pretty good size forecast in there. So that's probably not worth worrying about at this point. So 845 is the number.
So I guess my question to lead into the next discussion.
Yep.
Is Austin, what are you as the town's financial officer thinking how we're gonna get through the 850? What is your plan to?
To get to zero?
Yes.
Um,
Come on over, sit with us.
seems so far away.
No, he was over there for, he didn't have.
Yeah, I need to charge my thing.
Battery, that's all.
Yeah, so, Town of Holden, for example, which as one of the largest sending communities and, you know, in terms of their financial condition, they're in a much better position, I think, than the rest of us. Town of Holden is using free cash and stabilization for their budget this year. There's an option for you. You have 1.2 in general stabilization, you have 757 in your free cash right now. You split the difference between the two, there's an option to balance the budget.
How does that affect our bond rating?
I don't know, we're not looking to borrow anything big anytime soon. So the question
Until
that,
an oops happens.
the question that I think we should also ask as well is, okay, if you're gonna use reserves, tell me about replenishment, right? So if you watch the board meeting the other day, one of my recommendations is to pay our next school assessment with ARPA, which would replenish approximately 700 on the low end, $700,000 in free cash. We obviously taking a look at our revenue. We haven't released the Q2 report yet, but some of our revenues are looking pretty good. So I think we'll have a better than projected revenue. We could also, especially because we're in tight fiscal times, if there's a directive from the select board to slow down spending a little bit, we can also try to force a turn back in some of the department budgets for this year to increase our free cash. So that's replenishing on the free cash side, and then it's the community's decision about what you want to do to replenish the stabilization. So if you want to appropriate a bunch of that back into stabilization, by all means.
We worked really hard to get it up where it is now.
Yeah.
We worked really, really hard because we had depleted it a lot, balancing budgets.
So you've got 1.2 in general, you've got I'm gonna round up and say 350 in capital, 757 in free cash. You have the 1.5 in the Heights property for capital projects.
How about ARPA, how much is in it?
Unspent right now is about $1 million, but it's gonna be about 700,000 to 800,000 that is unobligated. That just means essentially you haven't contracted it or spent it or anything other.
So realistically, ARPA could get us through FY25.
Mostly.
Yeah, but once it's spent, it's gone.
Yeah, but why wouldn't we use, I understand that once it's spent, it's gone and it's a deficit thing. But why wouldn't we use that money to do this and keep, we have a better,
At least we
Control.
have that.
yeah, but they're gonna use, if we don't say, what if we ask the selectmen to put whole $850,000 towards, from ARPA money towards this deficit? Our money, the town's money, free cash, stabilization stays where it's at. Now, maybe that's the best thing, but it's ARPA money, we're not, no matter what we do, we're gonna be worse off, but if we spend it out of ARPA, it's gone. And but we never had it before anyways, it's found money. But if we take free cash and stabilization and do it, we're never gonna get it back.
Well, let's just clarify. We would be using free cash. ARPA would then be refunding free cash through. So just so
Well,
we
we
understand.
use it through federal ARPA money to fund 850. What I'm
Well, we
saying
can't
is,
say that.
why wouldn't we?
Good. Well, we're not using ARPA to fund the budget.
You
Reuse
can, legally.
You
I mean,
could,
you could, you did this year, use 43,000, in ARPA.
Operating?
Oh, yeah.
to fund the raises.
43,000 in ARPA and 252,000, for the budget.
So,
Okay,
so
corrected, sorry.
no, I'm just saying, why wouldn't we as a group, we can keep the money, free cash and stabilization money where it's at. And ARPA money, that money's going away, alright, how do I wanna say it politely?
It has to be
It's
spent.
gonna get,
spent,
it's gonna get spent no matter what.
Mhm.
We might as well put it towards this, because if we don't ask the selectmen to dedicate $850,000 to it, it's going away somewhere else.
So my recommendation is don't use it for FY 25. Use it for FY 24, because if we use it for FY 25, you won't see that until the end of FY 25 as free cash. So yeah, you'll still sit on 757 in free cash. You'll still sit on the 1.2 in stabilization. So yeah, you'll still have those reserves, but if you want some,
I'm just saying that,
Yeah,
I mean, it
I'm just
depends.
saying no matter, it's gonna get spent anyways, so what I'm hoping that we could control the way it gets spent.
But then what happens next year and the year after that and the year
We're-
after that? We're still in a
Well, no
deficit.
matter what happens, right, we're done anyways, right? We're looking up, we're underwater this year with this budget. And it's gonna get, it doesn't matter where the money comes from, I'm just saying, we put it to good use, Darren's good use, into this budget for the 850, at least we know responsibly where it's gone. You could buy a lot of different things with it, like we have in this town.
And then we'd
Over-
still have the 737,
Okay.
we'd still have the 737 in free cash.
See, because we don't control, the selectmen control where the ARPA money goes. So if we would make a request of them to use it towards this, there's things that ARPA money has been spent on that may not have necessarily been in the best interest of the town. How's that? So I'm saying if we ask politely to do it this way, we know where it's going.
I think you're 100% correct. Your point is that this is a good use of the money that we have available. In my opinion, I think the most important thing that you didn't state, and directly, I think you said it, but you didn't state it directly, is that last year we did an override to the town to provide additional funding to town operations to give additional services to the town. If we don't do this through free cash or ARPA or whatever, we're gonna have to cut all of those services. And that to me is a huge disservice to the town, to have an override go through and then literally the next year go and cut everything that we had just put in place. That to me is a huge disservice to the town and is not the right way to do it. We have the source to do this funding for this fiscal year. Going into future fiscal years, is obviously the big question. What do you do the following year? Because then you're going to be, let's call it 3% plus $800,000 to make up the difference of, which is going to be a large figure, right? I think it's what what do you have in the forecast? 1.1, 1.3,
in other years.
I
26,
just think it's
1.1. So
the wrong way to say it, but I'd say found money.
Yeah.
It's our money, but it's found money where we know how high we got to get where we are with our own under our umbrella.
I think,
and if you guys don't think, if Austin and Alex think it's not the right way to do it, show me a better way to do it, and I'll support you guys whatever you want. But I just, if you say, Austin, I guess where I'm going is, if you say to us, it's not a good way to use ARPA money because X, if we have a long discussion as a group about it, then that's, I'll maybe get there. But unfortunately, I'm like, that money, we spend that money on a lot of different things, and I'm not saying that all of them weren't needed, but we went through a ton of money. So I would like to see us dedicate that money towards this, and no matter what happens, we're in trouble next year, right? I'm not this. We got to get there. We're probably going to hit everything again next year, but that's all.
Yeah, I think next year, so there's $1.1 million in deficit next year, and that would theoretically include this 850. So next year is going to be 1.1. Let's call it 1.3 because we know the school's going to go higher. So let's call it 1.3 because
And if our bond rating, like Karen, is,
Well, it shouldn't
is still
change.
no, but
Shouldn't.
it shouldn't change if we do what we're doing and we use ARPA.
So
But
as
if
long
we-
as we don't touch stabilization.
If we touch our own funds, wouldn't it would go down and
Potentially could.
potentially, but we're
No one
like,
call Moody's on us.
right, but the question is, if the question is if I'd like to know what the schools, if we could pin them down to because we could. They're talking about a new fire station or a rebuild to that public safety building. They're talking about buildings down at Rutland Heights, a new community hall, a new whatever. The council on aging, a school that I didn't mention. So there's going to be plenty of opportunities for us to borrow, probably next year. Now, I don't want to affect our bond rating this year, if at all possible, because I think we're like a year or two away from having to borrow a shitload of money. I mean, a ton of money. Excuse me. We are, because it's only a matter of time.
You're 100% correct. I think that this year, that's why I kind of, FY25 in my mind is what it is. I think we can talk about other options, and we should talk about other options because, as mentioned in the past, if the usage of free cash gets turned down at town meeting, we have to have another option available. So we'll have to come up with something else on the table yet. But to me, I think I 100% agree. This is the best use or the best way to fund this budget without.
And I know
Going
ARPA's
back
free
on-
cash, but we got to. It's a different kind of free cash. I
It goes
guess.
away at the end of this year, right?
That's why we're trying to spend it, because it's gonna be very challenging by December 31st, 2024 to obligate the rest of it.
And then this way, if we were to go with that way, you'd still get the $700 and something thousand of free cash because you're carrying over the 737 from this year. So you're still doing the same thing.
Right.
It's just different.
It's just a
buckets.
different way.
Just
It's just a
different
different
buckets.
pile of
Just different
timing.
buckets.
Moving
Plus,
it from
we'll
one
have
to-
additional free cash that'll build up through this year. There's no doubt.
And I
I'll
agree
try
with
as
Lynn
we-
100% that it's we're still going to be in trouble, but we just got to use
through this
money
year?
that's in that bucket.
Well,
That's all.
we're pushing the can down the road is the truth.
Oh, it's coming.
We know, but we all know we're doing that. Now, Ted's got his hand up, but just a few things of why I'm not so scared of pushing the can down the road is because there are positives in the outlook, right? There's positive things. You have the Heights buildings going in. Theoretically, that's going to hit, partially in FY26. So that'll offset some of that $1.1 million. There's no doubts that we're going to find efficiencies going into future years now and ways that we can reduce spending in one way or another. So there's some positives. There's still going to be a huge problem, but honestly, if you say, I don't know what the total number I hear for Heights is like $900K in total revenue for each year, right? In total. So if we were to say somewhere around half of those got built in FY26 or by FY26, so we could say we're going to get $400,000 to $500,000 in revenue in FY26. That brings the 1.1 down to nearly 700,000 ish, which is a much more reasonable number to get towards a bottom line of
As
zero.
long as we don't give any raises or don't have any increases.
Yeah, I
Well,
think-
no, but the
I think-
1.1 would have raises and increases.
I
though.
think that's a pretty optimistic number for that place down there too, so, but that's
I
fine.
I don't doubt that, and I'm just trying to say that I think there's positives that are going to have positive impacts going forward that we have not taken into account, or that Austin has not taken into account on his forecast. That'll bring that
You put
that
into
number
the
down
Heights property into your forecast, didn't you?
No,
26, 27, you didn't include them at all?
because he had no idea what was going.
Well,
on.
there's a contract. It's a contract that they have to build so many
yeah,
every single year.
so look at the development agreement, to, I think, complete phase one, which is approximately half, it's 4.5 years from the very first building permit.
right.
Which can be extended another 2 years,
Right, if the RDIC.
just for phase one.
Right, exactly. No, I get it. But-
So
So
they're not-
that's
they're
why
not-
I'm like,
They
But
can
there's
move-
liquid-
I'd rather be
damages.
conservative with this
I'm with you, I get
financial
it.
plan.
I get it.
I also, you know,
the
we
way
know
to
at
do it.
some point, probably this year, we'll have a recreational cannabis facility. It's not gonna be much, but it's something, right? I didn't incorporate, and actually, by law, you're not allowed to budget for a cannabis revenue. So, I leveled state aid, I leveled our local receipts. So try to be as conservative as possible. But yeah, I mean, kind of as Alex mentioned and everyone, we're gonna have some better news. New growth for FY 26 is I put at 400,000, and slightly decreased it in the outer years, hoping for better news.
Alex,
But sorry. So, but at this point next year, we'll have a better position. Obviously, we'll know what actual FY 25 new growth is. Remember, we budgeted $400,000 in new growth for FY 24, and it came in at 313. So, again, I'd rather be lower.
Yeah.
Than be wrong.
What you just said about the override and it getting eaten up by other stuff. We did the same thing, how many, 6 years, 7 years ago, we had an override for,
That was for the municipal government. And
Right.
the next year, the school took it.
well, right,
Yeah.
the school said we're only gonna do this much, so we raised it for the municipal side, next thing you know, their budget came in
Yeah.
and ate the whole thing up, gone.
Yeah, that's how it's.
But anyways,
works.
That's
Only
old
the first
news,
year.
but
Yeah.
it's just,
So, I
it's
mean,
happened before.
This obviously
Unfortunately.
doesn't help FY 25, but there was a question about, you know, what could we do to try to control spending? One of the ideas that I mentioned at that budget meeting was, and I've seen this done in my previous community and other communities as well, is a leadership group that meets by law every month with school district officials, school committee member, finance committee member, and then all of the communities, administration, finance committee, and select board member. And every month they meet to talk about the budget. They talk about current budget, they talk about next year's budget, and it's a consensus. So when Dr. Riley says this is gonna be a really tough year, he's not just saying it to Austin, he's saying it to everyone. But then the towns can also say very early, this is a tough year for us too. And by the time they get to May, they have a consensus and they know that Holden or Rutland or anyone can only afford a 3% overall budget increase, and they try to make it work. Rather than like end of February we get a number and we're all scrambling. But again, I know that doesn't solve this year, but if we're on Thursday, if we talk about like
But when you
ideas for the
met with
budget
them, didn't you
discussion.
tell them that we were in a tight,
Oh yeah, and every other town
and
did
every
too.
other town did,
Yeah.
so I mean, so we had this leadership thing, which makes one more meeting for everyone to go to, which don't get me wrong, sometimes they work. But if they're not listening to you, when you're all sitting there telling them how tough your budgets are and how tough your spending is, what's gonna make a difference if there's 12 more people in the room?
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, I'm
Well,
not
because at that
discounting.
point you have the actual, like, I mean, that doesn't include school committee members who ultimately vote on the budget. Get the people who actually vote on the budget in the room.
But
And the people that develop the budget. I mean, Dr. Riley has developed the budget, right? He's a part of it, but he's got his business and finance people.
Michelle does the budget.
Right. Well, and she's got some team members.
Yeah,
too.
right.
one of Karen's points was getting the school committee members more involved in all aspects, and to which point your team meeting, right, includes the school committee. But we could just cut out the common denominators there and say get the school committee more involved with you and us to get the
I think you're gonna need representatives from all 5 communities in that room, because another community's school committee members probably don't care about Rutland's financial problems.
Yep. Okay. It's certainly something to. I'm not against it. I mean, whether it's every month, every 2 months, every quarter, there could be. You can make it less or more often, more useful. So I think there's maybe a balance that we could find that could potentially help that, because we only do that never now, right? We do it once per year when representatives go, right? So like it really happens once per year, but it's minimal amount of people there.
And the
But it
budget's
happens
already
every
set at
month
that
when
point.
he goes. That's
Right. I know.
so it's once a month with multiple people, but
Yeah.
he's there every month. I mean,
But the
Austin's
school
chief
committee-
guy, so he
yeah.
should know what's going on in the town, and he does.
But the school committee members, I think, to his point, are the ones that are voting on the budget.
And I didn't know the numbers before you guys. The only one I knew
No, I
was
know.
transportation.
Right, because that comes out of the school, that
and
comes
the
out of the
minimum
state.
local. But everything else, I'm like, I think Lynn probably saw me walk up and my first.
He was like, yeah.
Yeah,
Shock.
Yeah.
Ted,
unfortunately,
sorry.
it happens all the time.
Ted, you've had your hand up for quite some time. I apologize.
Thank you. So Austin, I can't remember from the night that we had the departments in front of us, but are there any increases in the FY25 budget that are, maybe we'd call them wish list items or new things that we could say, maybe that needs to wait until next year? Or are there any capital purchases that we might wait until next year when we can use the Rutland Heights property?
No, so most, if not all, of the line items, especially for supplies and services, are level funded. The only increases, so for example, the elections budget is increased because we have elections that we have to run. And then all the others are contractual.
So minimal to no fluff, basically.
Except COLAs. Those aren't contractual, but we did give COLAs, correct? This
Correct.
budget
Yeah,
doesn't
but
cover.
how can you know?
And I know that, I just wanna make sure, cause I was like, I
Oh,
understood
I
that
see
there
what you're
was
saying.
COLAs.
Right.
I wanted to make sure there were COLAs, I'm like, wait a minute, I heard that they were COLAs.
Was there a second question? Did I miss it?
Did I answer all of your questions?
I feel like there's something else.
I guess one of the second part two of that was, were there any capital expenditures that could be pushed until we can actually use the Rutland Heights money?
No capital expenditures proposed in the general fund budget. The funding sources for the capital budget include either the use of a free cash source, an article, retained earnings from water and sewer, or identifying grant opportunities.
Ted, generally speaking, you don't pay for capital items out of general
With the
operating expense.
sorry, Alex.
Sometimes you do.
With the exception of the police cruiser leases and the animal control cruiser, for lack of a better word, lease. And I think that was a decision from CIPC to include those in the operating budget. And those are around $20,000 of capital.
But it's something we have to pay that. We can't get away from paying that.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
And I know we've already talked about this in prior meetings. Can we go to Devro and say, could you hand over some more, please?
It goes to a gift account.
Yeah.
It goes to a gift account that the police chief handles.
Yeah, I will say though that I think that the amount that they give us is obviously very limited. I was actually recently talking about can I say this?
no, I was gonna say where you going, no. I knew where you're going, no,
Yeah.
at a budding town, no.
I'm gonna leave that one out.
Did we
Sorry.
get the question answered about whether they contribute towards the students that attend school?
I don't know if we did.
So
They pay payroll tax, but they don't pay.
They don't pay
Taxes.
property taxes, right?
correct. So the students that, so for example, the students that are coming from, and I'm going to use Acton as an example. If an Acton student attends Devro, it's the Acton Boxborough Regional School District that pays the tuition, split between the state.
Where tuition to Devro or tuition to our local schools where they put the student?
Both.
Oh, all right.
Because they're paying that whether they're staying in Acton Boxborough or they're going to Wachusett through Devro. So they're paying the required tuition from the state. And that's split between some state agency that I keep forgetting and Acton Boxborough Regional School District. There was a question at the last about non-residents. Non-residents do not attend the Wachusett Regional School District. Their time is very limited at Devro. And any costs associated with those students are paid for by a federal agency.
Can we get that in writing that there will be no non-residents going to Wachusett?
No.
So see, that's a political answer right there, yeah.
Their time is limited in Rutland because I'm saying more than I should. There's a federal agency that is identifying a residency for them. And let's just say the local organization is more of a placement and screening organization.
Okay. So I think one of the things we need to, at least I'd like to get to Austin tonight, is a direction that this board wants him to take with FY25. So right now we've had a lot of conversation around, we think it's best, and by we I mean I think two people have directly stated it. There are plenty of other people who haven't directly stated it, so I don't want to say that everyone's thinking this, but at least I know I support using the free cash towards covering the $850,000. Sounds like Darren does too, because he said that directly. Does the board want to talk about other options at this point of giving directive to town administrator to go in a different direction or come up with a different direction?
Or how are we gonna plan for when someone stands up and says, I only want you to use $250,000 of free cash?
Yes, that too.
We've always gone in with several budgets.
Well, if they cut a revenue source without an appropriate expense, that by default does not provide for a balanced budget amendment. And the product of a town meeting is to pass a balanced budget. So if they're saying motion to reduce use of free cash by X, I think it's not unreasonable for the moderator or the town clerk or whomever to say, what do you propose reducing that in the budget?
Could we?
Okay, and are you prepared for when someone who just goes down and says, cut this, 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 and this? And we can't cut all those things that they're gonna say because some of them are contractual.
You can, but you
Well,
won't get laid off.
you would think that I'm gonna say this, you would think that wouldn't pass on the floor. I get it that it's a possibility that it could, but
Using $850,000 of ARPA funds to fund this year's budget and knowing full well that next year we got a $1-point-something million deficit is a huge, huge, huge ladder to go up. So all we're doing is just kicking down the road and that can keeps getting bigger. And let me tell you, $408,000 was very painful to collect. I can't imagine 1-point-something. I can't even think if it's 700.
yeah, I mean, there's no doubt we have an override in the future.
So then that's my next question.
Mhm.
We have to, as I think as a finance committee, since we all stood behind the projections, we need to know what assumptions you made to do your projection last year so that we can refute them when that comes up as a question.
Yeah.
So that way we can say, well, we made the assumption was made that it was this and it really turned out to be this, and we made the assumption it was this and it was really this.
I mean, the major difference is just the school. I had 4%, I think, in the school budget, and it was he put 5, and then the actual is 10, right? Or
Right.
7 or whatever.
And
it is. So
I
that's-
get it.
That's
But
the
I think,
basis. of it.
I think we need to be prepared for that if we're gonna try to sell this.
It's gonna be a tough sell.
Cause I'm seeing that now we just paid a lot more money in taxes. Tax bills just came out, right? And now we're gonna use ARPA funds, potentially free cash, stabilization, whatever funds, one-time funds we're gonna use to balance the budget. Next year, we're saying, yeah, buckle up, folks, cause there's probably gonna be a big amount that we can't do. So all we're doing is just, and I'm not saying that we should cut services, but we have to be prepared because people are paying a lot more money and they keep getting less and less and less and less and less. And eventually that has to stop.
They're getting less service?
They're getting level service, which just means they're getting less and less and less.
Well, not
Shouldn't we
this
be
year,
going
right?
up?
I mean, not this year. In FY '24, you increased staffing for most, if not all, of the departments.
We brought it up to the levels
Yeah.
that was there before,
Well,
but
and
now
some
you're saying,
increase, like the
but you're
library got a
saying
40 hour
25 is level service.
Yep.
So no extras, no extra hours, no extra anything, and we're just doing the minimum.
Well, we're providing services that were promised that the town needed in FY
Right,
'24.
but level service means that there's going to be a decrease of some sort, because a level service, you can only do so much without increasing and increasing and increasing and increasing. I mean, costs keep going up.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Unless you guys got a coupon code that I'm unaware of, they go up.
well, that's called grants.
Right, and our department heads are fantastic at getting them, without a doubt. Always
Yeah, I
says
mean,
it.
certainly I have department heads that, you know, probably wish that they could have gotten some new supplies or services in their budget, and unfortunately, given where we were at that time,
Sure.
most
you
of
had
those
the
have been
hands up
level funded. But I don't think it's fair to say that they're getting less. I mean, we're still trying to provide the best service we can. I mean, DPW's finally in a position where they have long needed to be. I think the library, as well, you look at all the programming that ASLN and the children's librarian, so there's been a lot of good work in terms of, and I think we're all grateful that the town supported that override last year. But, you can make the argument, hey, I wasn't here, but they talked about a $3 million override last year, and it went down to 2. It'd be pretty nice if we had 3.
But it wouldn't, that would, again, I don't disagree,
Yeah,
but
just put it up by year.
that would be a one-time fix as well, which is all we're,
Would have got it, yeah, would have got.
would have got us through one more year
Maybe
versus now, potentially next
Well,
year.
remember,
we
you
might have
get
to look at
2.5
overrides.
of that extra million too.
Yeah.
So that added, that would have added 3 to your base and 2.5
But there's
to
a
that.
large chance that wouldn't have passed. There's a chance that wouldn't have passed. So who knows? You don't know. None of us know. Ted, you have your hand up again?
Yes, you just asked to get a feel from each of us in terms of what we supported going forward. When you say using free cash to balance the budget, is using the ARPA funds interchangeable with using free cash, or is that a second option that we would use those ARPA funds instead of our free cash?
Terms of conversation, it's interchangeable at this point. Whether it's through ARPA or through free cash, at this point, we're considering it the same thing.
You can't though. Free cash and ARPA funds are two very different things.
I get it.
And one, we don't have enough, and the other, we have plenty.
But
Or a combination of the two.
conservatively,
Plenty in either.
technically don't have plenty
In either.
in ARPA either. I gave you $700,000 as the number.
I said 7, 8.
7 to 8, but I was being conservative, going lower, because, and that's the number I gave to the board the other day, was 700,000. Do I think it'll be a little bit higher? Yeah. But we do have some contractual things that are in ARPA right now, so, but if you were to look at the special revenue balance sheet as of whatever it was, there's still $1 million in unspent money that was given at the last meeting.
So I guess the correct answer is a combination of both. Is the correct way we would be balancing the budget. Yep. But the current idea on the table is to use ARPA to pay a school bill in FY24, which would make ARPA become the remaining unspent money in FY24 become free cash, and therefore we would use free cash to balance FY25.
No, 26. Because the free cash doesn't get balanced until November. So you can't balance this year's budget for June until November unless we're gonna put off the town meeting until November.
No, so, yeah, this would become free cash certified in, August, September. So if we were to propose, funding with, free cash and a combination of something else, we would see that replenished in September sometime when it's certified. Through, again, excess revenues, unspent general fund budgets, and then turn back of, whatever the ARPA figure is, so.
You have listed recreation and safe place under human services. Those are still revolving funds. That hasn't changed, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I have a question. I know Tommy had asked before about the unspent articles from the special town meetings and free cash allocations and everything, and I know we as a select board haven't discussed those, kind of giving you directive as to how to pursue those monies, but I think some of the conversation is either trying to reallocate them if there's a similar need that we can reallocate based on the article wording, or wipe them to default to free cash, as those are pretty much our only two options, correct?
Yeah, reappropriate or close out the articles in the defense.
And I think in the financial policies, it's recommended that if they're not used within that year or the time in progress contractually obligated within that year, that they would automatically just default back to free cash. Is that?
Yep.
And do you have a number as far as ballpark as what the outstanding? I know we have it. I just don't know off the top of my head.
It would be approximately $200,000 because there's still one right now for the NAQUAG electrical upgrades that obviously is still ongoing. So that one I'm going to remove from the calculation. So it's about $200,000. And there's town charter. There's some other things that may still be community priorities, but.
And if we take that money away, we'll never have that money. It could potentially take that much longer to get there again.
Yeah, so it's going to be. There's there's a feasibility study for the senior center that I think a proposal would be to use that for the municipal services facility. So you round down a little bit more, maybe 150.
100,000
yeah.
somewhere in that ballpark. I was just curious. I know we had the conversation. I know Tommy brought it up at FinCom a couple weeks ago, and we've had it off and on at select board, and I couldn't remember the numbers off the top of my head.
Yep.
Thank you.
Could you ask the rest of our committee what their feelings are on getting the $850,000?
Ted has another question too.
Ted, why don't you go ahead, Ted? I thought I did.
Okay, so I don't know that it's really a question. It's just something to think about. Though maybe it is a question. So if the year after an override, it would be considered a punch to the gut to cut. I also think it's a punch to the gut to use a ton of free cash to balance the budget. Anyone have an opinion if it's a worse punch to the gut to cut or use free cash? And I'm sort of being a devil's advocate, but I think they're both bad. But I don't know if anyone's got any opinion on which is worse.
Cut the services. It's just my opinion.
I think it's all gonna depend upon who comes to the town meeting, because I think you're gonna get some people that are gonna know where we stand and could stand up and say, what are our plans for next year? And that's the whole thing, because I wanna know what our plan is for next year. I know I do, and I know there's at least 5 or 6 other people I can think of off the top of my head that will be there asking the same question. Because you, the 850, that's great, whoop, great, it's
Yeah, but
fixed
we-
for this year. Now, for next year, what are we gonna do?
We said this 1,000 times. We all know we don't want to use free cash, the other one-time money to do the budget, but we gotta do something.
Right.
We gotta do something.
They're both bad, but
They're both bad, and I agree with what Alex just said. We work so hard to get the other stuff built up where it should be on the town side. You're just gonna break it back down again?
Okay, so let's just.
I don't know.
Let's just say next year is 850. What are we gonna do to fix it next year?
Well, then if there's no free cash left, then you gotta cut services. You got no choice then.
So either way, it's just, I'm gonna keep saying it, the $408,000 was a royal pain. It was painful, it was hurtful, but we had to do it. And I wouldn't wanna go through that again.
408. I'm sorry, I didn't follow.
$408,000 that we used free cash one year. And that year when we had to cut $408,000 from the budget, it was, we did not have the right person sitting in your chair, and he threw his hands up, and we had to make the cut.
But I don't think the use of free cash has ever been close on the votes. That year we used a substantial amount. I think it passed like 27-2.
Did
Which,
you? Yep.
you know, so
But in the years, this is now, we've passed a 2.5 override. That's where it gets a little mucky,
it's possible.
because people
Yeah.
feel it in the pocketbook now.
Yeah, I mean, I you can make the argument that even with the $2 million, I still think that, you know, that we still have a 10-hour a week town accountant with a $2 million override.
Mhm.
We technically don't have a full-time finance team. You can make the argument that our senior center is understaffed. You can make the argument that some of our other programs and services are understaffed. So that's not a woe is me on the town budget situation, but I don't think that there was a lot of additions. We could use a whole facilities crew. We talk about needs for all these facilities. We could use a whole facilities crew just for the DPW. So.
I'm not denying any of that.
So if we get, I mean, if directive is take a look and see what you could do for some efficiencies, we could certainly do that as well. It's not going to be a $850,000 efficiency for the budget.
But you look at that no matter what. You're looking at efficiencies going into the future
Yeah.
as a part of your role, and
Right.
I mean you're already doing that.
Yeah.
It's not going to cut $800,000. We might see $100,000 over the next 3 years that gets cut in different ways, but it's going to be minimal. But it's positive direction,
Sure.
so there's no
Sure.
doubt that that's good, and you should be looking for that along with grants, and I know you know that. So those are two things that, yes, we give you directive to look for efficiencies and grants, but you're already doing that, right? So that's definitely something that we all want to happen. I think part of this conversation that I kind of faulted my knowledge on is the way that free cash would get used for this balancing of the budget. So we have 757. We won't have additional certified until after we would pass the budget, right? That's the correction. So I was not thinking about that. So I think that I would love to see a budget where we only use free cash to balance it and don't use stabilization, because I think that has negative consequences. If there's something that we could cut out of the budget that we could potentially look at in a special town meeting when we have additional free cash, it's something that would be a way that we could do that. I'd rather be able to cut down to where free cash is enough, but that would be a positive thing. And then I think we're gonna have to get some sort of budget on record that gets us down to a palatable number, like 300,000 of free cash used, which is going to be tough. But I think that needs to be something that is seen. Only if to say to the town, here's what happens if you don't approve this budget. Here's what your town would look like. Here's what services would be lost. Here's how people's jobs would be. Like it's a doomsday scenario, and I, that might be the wrong way to put it, but it is what it is.
That's what we gave them last year.
Yeah, and I think that's I hate to say it, but I think that that's almost necessary
We've
from
done
just
it for
an
a lot of
aspect
years.
of making the town understand what not approving the use of free cash would look like, and that should also help to follow up with here's what not doing an override in the future, whatever future year that is, would have, what'll happen there too. It's not hopefully that doesn't happen and all that jazz, but I think I support using the free cash in next year's budget. I think Darren stated it as well. I don't know if anyone else wants to say that they do for FY25. If anyone else has an opinion of what they'd like to see Austin do with the budget and come to us, not Thursday, but we have a meeting the following Thursday. So that gives him, 2 weeks to come up with an additional budget. Does anyone have an opinion or a directive that they'd like to see and we could agree on and give him a direction to go?
Well, I would agree with a combination of the two if we probably
Mhm.
could. And not using stabilization.
Yeah, ARPA and free cash.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because then we're just doing the same thing that you recommended to the selectmen. It's bringing it over next year, cause we're not gonna use as much in free cash, so that money it just brings over, so it's gonna have the same.
Either way, we're making free cash.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay.
So use of stabilization is,
I think we would all like
No.
to see stabilization not touched.
Yeah.
I know I said that wrong.
If we could, yeah, I mean,
Impossible, right?
if it comes down to the.
Because at the end of the day, if push comes to shove, we have to use that the following year, then that's,
Plus, that's a 2/3 vote.
Yep.
And he's got his fingers.
And sorry, yeah, he gave the thumbs up.
Yeah,
If-
just so FYI, if the Municipal Empowerment Act passes, that only becomes a majority vote.
it doesn't change the fact that I think it's something that's good to not use until, I mean, that's our, oh shit money,
Mhm.
excuse me.
Is a municipal empowerment act, that's something the governor's just been talking about, right? And we can, is that true? I heard a rumor that we can go over the 2.5 levy limit for this year because of that. Is that true or false?
So you can do, are you familiar with, capital outlay exclusions? So it's like a 1 year, essentially debt exclusion. So you could do that for operational for 1 year. So for example, you could do that for 1 year. $850,000, and I forget what it's called, but it's essentially a debt exclusion for 1 year
for operations.
for operations.
So then what happens next year? Can you do it again, or are they, if
You
you're
could do it you could every year if you wanted to,
Oh, you could do it every year. It's not like you do it 1 year and you gotta wait 5 years or something, or.
but it's still a valid vote. So it still has to go to town meeting, and still has to go to the election.
Is that the only thing that this is the thing that the governor proposed?
There's a couple other things you can add. It's a local option for an additional 5% surcharge for motor vehicle excise, which is local revenue. There's some other creative revenue sources that,
The
but
meals,
it's all local option.
the meals tax could go up a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, by like
I think
3%.
1%,
Oh yeah,
I think it
yeah.
was.
So 3/4% to 1%. So
So is it anything you're considering?
it's funny because at the MMA conference, I had another town administrator next to me, and I said, "Which one of us is going to be the town administrator to say we want to raise your local excise taxes?"
Yeah.
But it's a local option, so the town meeting has to vote on it. So, I mean, all revenue, any additional revenue is good, but.
I remember a few years ago, the conversation, how hard for the meals tax, how hard that conversation was at town meeting. I think now that it's been in place for a while, I don't know how many people are choosing which junks they go to, based on what the meals tax percentage is.
I'd like to go one across the street, but I can't because the traffic's so bad.
Or similar, choosing where they go out to eat based on meals tax option or not. I think most of the surrounding communities are at a maximum percent also, so I don't know, and then as far as the excise tax, I think that was one of the considerations as an option for increased revenue, but again, I think that's one of those that goes to town meeting. I remember the meals tax conversation at town meeting and how kind of.
Yeah, but that wasn't all borne. The nice thing about that one was when we brought that forward, it's not all borne by the taxpayers in town. It's anyone that comes in.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it was a little bit easier to sell than hitting the same people who just paid a 2.5 override. Now we're gonna hit for an extra 5% for motor vehicle excise tax. And it's not like we get a free car wash on Sundays or something like that. You know, we don't get anything out of it.
I think also, and Austin, you can correct me, and I'm not sure, I thought that there were some options also for like Airbnb or like hotel tax options also. Rutland obviously doesn't have any hotels, but we have some Airbnbs, and those taxes are generally handed down to the end user, right? So again, that could be another, I think, local option for slightly increasing revenue.
The 5% would give us about an extra $80,000 for FY25 for motor vehicle.
Don't mention that to the school, that's all.
You just
too late, they
Can
just heard it.
Austin, can I ask, is it okay if at some point, I don't think it's super urgent, but to get a better understanding is how, if we were ever to need to go to stabilization, how that actually would impact our bond rating? At what point is it viewed as a positive thing versus a negative thing? And does it matter on what our stabilization account has, or how frequently we're doing it, or what it's going to be used for, or the amount, or just so we can have a better understanding? I don't know if anybody on finance committee knows. I don't,
I
and so,
just remember we had to build it up because our
Yes.
bond rating was in the toilet.
yes, and
And
I,
we had to build it up because that got us the cheaper deal.
Right.
And that's the whole thing, we want the cheaper rate so that when we have to, and
yeah,
you know, I'm always one for save for a rainy day, cause it rains constantly in Rutland when budget time comes around.
It's gonna rain soon, we know that. We're gonna be looking for a few things.
Yeah, I mean, that's, and of course, your bond rating, your reserves is not the only thing, right? So
Right.
I could certainly go into
It's a
that
lot of stuff.
presentation.
There's, you know, they wanna see that you actually have a capital plan and you
Sure.
fund it. So section 10 of the budget book has our most recent bond rating, and it talks about the methodology. So it's page 166, talks about the methodology for calculating your bond rating. What are the strong things, what are the not so strong things. So yeah, so we can certainly, I can try to find some resources as well to inform people about that. But you know, as Karen mentioned, it wouldn't necessarily downgrade our bond rating immediately next year.
Right.
But also, you know, I've been on several bond rating calls with Moody's and S&P, and you know, you have an opportunity to defend. You know, they don't just automatically assign you a bond rating. So if they say, hey, we noticed your reserves went down, you have to provide some responses to, you know, why and what's your methodology for replenishing it, things like that. And then they take that all into account and provide your new bond rating. So, but you know, if they want to look at how are you doing with your budgeting in terms of putting together, do you have a formal process? What do your debt profile look like? So there's a lot there, but we can certainly have greater detail for you.
So, anyone else notice the payroll reserve in the Wachusett budget?
Yep,
It's a good question for Thursday.
and did you look at the stipend? How much they're going up?
Well, you're talking total stipend?
No, athletic stipends, how much they're going up?
Oh, I missed the.
Look at the
athletic stipend.
subs and how much they're going up. Look at the nursing stipends and how much those are going up. Yeah, there's a lot of big increases, and I'm like, hold on a
Where do you
second.
see the
Well, do
athletic?
they have unsettled contracts?
I think they have a few, yeah.
So, I mean, that
Comp reserve is probably for
collective bargaining agreements, I would assume.
Yeah, it's pretty sizable though.
It's a big number though.
well, it's a big. Well, I mean, is it though? It's $100 million budget, 650,000 of 100 million.
Yeah, but they also have
120 million.
$1.5 million of an increase in the teacher salary regular.
It's a big district. Almost 7,000 students, 13
Yeah.
schools.
Yeah, it's not that big though.
It's the biggest regional school.
Yeah, I know it, but I mean the overall spending. It's not.
It could be bigger.
These are big numbers for increases. I mean, $2 million on 73 is what? What's the percentage on that? No, it's like 5%, right? Roughly under, just under 2.6.
It's more than our increases, let me put it that way.
It's 3.5%.
We'd all like to go up 3.5%, wouldn't you?
It's a 3.5% increase.
3.5% to every single one of our departments. The library might be able to be open maybe on Mondays for a little bit.
That's 3.5% is a huge payroll increase nowadays. I mean, granted,
Yeah.
some companies are doing it with inflation being this high, but I
I don't
mean,
know, what was their
it's not a small number.
contractual increases for CBAs?
Granted, that's total, so that includes new
We tried
positions.
to keep
and
them
things,
between 2 and 3%, and then
I
added
think we've
steps,
done all we
and
can do
there was
but- Yeah, so
previous
I
administration.
think we have some
never took
directive
into
that
account steps.
we given
So
to
they would just put in a
TA.
flat
Does anyone,
percentage.
again, I just wanna make sure that I'm putting it out as many times as I can. Would anyone like to give any other directive to the town administrator at this time?
It's not so
To look at other budgeting options or look at other budgeting ones? We still have plenty of time, but
longevity and-
I just wanna make sure that we're giving him as much directive as we can with as much time as possible.
Well, I think seeing that second one with only spending, you know, 300,000.
300,000, okay.
Free cash. I think that one right there is gonna be eye-opening for the town.
So I think,
It gives a reason why we need to spend the money, and I get that. And then we just need to put into writing what we're gonna do for fiscal year 26 to cover the structural deficit that we're causing.
so I think, I hope you understand the idea. It's not that we're saying that we're giving a budget, that we want a budget of 300,000 to be passed at town. Like, we want to have this budget so that people can understand and see what would happen if they didn't approve the use of free cash.
And if we can, since we have a quorum, can I just get Tom and Paul, is your sense as far as kind of I think we talked about using ARPA to have default free cash. I think the conversation tonight is a little bit different in using it as a revenue source in the budget rather than putting it to this year's assessment, putting it in the budget revenue for this upcoming fiscal year. Is your sense, are you amenable to that? I mean, we're not gonna take a vote tonight. I just wanna get a sense from at least the three of you. And I know Jen's watching in and out. I'm not sure if she's still on or not via Zoom.
Well, I think that, yeah, okay, we're looking at increasing and then you're throwing around the idea about increasing taxes like, on your cars and so on and so forth. People in the town who use town water, town sewer are always looking at increases in those bills as they come down the road at you too. So in other words, you have to realize that, there's probably a little bit more to this than meets the eye.
I was gonna mention water and sewer earlier, but I.
Were you?
I leave it out.
Tommy, we've never heard you mention water, so.
I was gonna earlier, but I said, well.
The minute I hear the capital are gonna be used from the water and sewer
Right. Well,
retained earnings, I always look at
Then
Tommy.
I really would, is that
Tom,
something?
I don't know if you can hear us, if you have any input or anything. I think the general outcome is similar to what we had talked about in our meeting. It's just doing things a little flopped.
Yeah, sorry guys, you cut in and out there for a second. If I understood correctly, the discussion is whether or not to use our money up front or use it for projects in town. Use it towards the school or use it for projects in town. That's what you're talking about?
I think it's more whether we put the ARPA money towards the current school assessment, so then the money would default, the excess would default to free cash next year, so be certified for the fall. Or put the ARPA in the fiscal year 25 budget as a revenue source to help balance, that would allow more free cash to remain untouched this year. So essentially the same, everything is still essentially being free cash there. It's just, free cash is still being replenished or maintained.
It's just when it gets used.
Exactly.
Really.
It's more the timing of when it gets used.
Doesn't change the purpose of the use.
Although I think,
We don't need a vote tonight though, right?
no, we're not, I'm not taking a vote tonight, just kind of more to get a sense to
Right.
at least the three of us that are here.
Yeah, we should start thinking about it.
Exactly. And in some ways,
Definitely a lot to do.
Well, it was brought up at their select board meeting, so they're at
And in
least
some
all
ways, having
working
it
on it.
as a revenue source is then going to essentially all of town, right? And not putting it towards a school assessment for this year that then would default, that the school assessment cash would then be defaulted to free cash. This is going to the entirety of the budget.
What a political answer.
Well, it is. Either way, it's gonna default to having free cash brought over. It just depends upon what line we're putting it on. Whether we pay a bill this year or whether we put it on a line in the budget. Either way, it'll go.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on FY25 budget? We have school coming in Thursday, at 6:15, 6?
6, I think.
6? Oh boy, barely work early.
Tamika, did you call Bay Path and ask him to bring cookies?
Are they supposed to?
We used to get cookies from the old administration, cause they had the culinary people, they brought that big platter for cookies.
See what I can
Really?
do.
No, less chapter 7, you can't afford it.
Huh?
I said less chapter 7, you can't afford it.
They can afford it. There's 7 of us, bring
Make a
7
motion to-
cookies, we'll be
Make a motion to
fine.
The
adjourn.
big ones with chocolate chips in them.
And raisins and stuff.
Wait,
Yeah.
Make a motion
I don't
to
get a
adjourn.
cookie?
No.
What?
Let's see that.
Less chapter 70 money.
That's right, yeah.
I have no problem asking for a cookie.
Is there a
Second,
on the motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay.
Oh,
Gee, you could have seconded it too.
No, I let Tommy do it. He looked forward to that.
Roll call, any discussion on, okay.
Winnica,
roll call.
aye.
Charlotte, aye.
Narwhal, I.
Ross, aye.
Ted?
Aye.
What would I?
And I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Second emotion.
So I guess I made the
Okay,
motion. Paul will second it. Roll call.
Matt's and I.
Tom.
Young,
Whitman, aye. Thank you, and thanks, Jen, if you're still on.